Namaste and hello, Rukus Avenue Radio listeners. This is Priyadarshini G. Roy, your Rukus Avenue Radio correspondent. Our special segment today has a Rukus in-house talent. So I'd like to introduce Mr. Vik Toreus. He's an international DJ and producer. Vik Toreus performs all over the UK and internationally. He promotes his music and performance style as an eclectic mashup of contemporary urban and eclectic fused with Asian and world music. He has showcased his talents around the world: Brazil, USA, Turkey, Malta, Italy, and Bulgaria, just to name a few. So he's performed for a variety of events, nightclubs, festivals, weddings, and fashion shows. So Vik Toreus, I'd like to welcome you to our special segment, and you're an in-house talent, so it's a pleasure to meet you and have you on the show.
Thank you very much. Very happy to be here. It's great to connect with another Rukus Ave Radio host, so thanks so much for making the time. Very excited to be speaking with you.
Amazing. I know we had a little bit of a time difference since it's almost 10:30 British summertime right now?
It is. It's hot British summer right now, but I end up usually working US hours, so it's not a problem for me. In fact, I actually prefer, like many creatives, we tend to work a bit later in the evening compared to everyone else.
Yeah, absolutely. I always stay up sometimes to make connections with my Bollywood contacts. And so it's always, a WhatsApp call away. And, that's the name of the game. You gotta, if you really want it, you gotta stay up and you gotta sacrifice sleep. So any of the artists out there that are listening, take it from us. And we're just, giving you some inspiration and some knowledge from our journey onwards and upwards. So Vik Toreus, please tell us your journey as an artist, producer, and DJ. You're a great talent and you have a lot of accolades. So let's hear more about your story.
So I've been a professional DJ for the past 13, 14 years. That's really my bread and butter. That's how I started as a DJ. Working my way up from small family events to Asian affiliated events, then moving into sort of the nightlife scene, bars, clubs, then festivals, and then radio. So just like many other DJs, started right from the bottom and now I'm here. And I'd say really probably in the last 6 or 7 years, I've transitioned more into a music producer and an artist. So now I consider myself not just a DJ, but a music producer. As an artist, I have a growing profile. I release my own music, my own remixes, and that's what I've been doing full time for a while now. In addition to all that, I also have a radio show on Rukus Ave Radio, which is called United Colors. So I've been with the station since inception, really. So almost 3 years with Rukus Ave Radio and Dash. And I've had the opportunity to connect with so many different artists from around the world. And it's just been a really exciting experience for me. And I'm happy to keep on sort of continue what I'm doing and just growing day by day as an artist, as a DJ, just learning more, trying to improve myself and trying to improve my craft as we go along.
That's a wonderful introduction. Thank you for sharing your journey. And I especially like the fact that you are multi-talented on the technical aspect as well. Like you said, you produce your own music, you do your own sound systems, and you're able to engineer a lot of the unique music abilities that you have, which I think is lacking in a lot of musical artists that we come across. Not to say that everyone has to be a jack of all trades, but it definitely helps and it makes you stand out in the crowd. Like you see people like Charlie Puth, who went to music school to actually learn how to arrange his own music. And I think you see the trajectory of his career and how that's exponentially taken off, where he's able to do independent music on his own, especially during times like COVID, where we were in isolation, we were under lockdown, and a lot of our creative endeavors were kept confined within our own houses. So being able to produce your own content, whether that is through music, through filmmaking, any type of storytelling, really, I think is a huge talent in itself. So congratulations for that. And I'd like to ask you, you're obviously in England. So what has it been like being raised in the South Asian influence in England? How did you grow up? And how did the music culture, everything affect your musical tastes?
Yeah, so it's interesting because there is a very large South Asian community here in the UK. I guess the key difference between the UK and the US is just the size of the country. The population is completely different. So the US, there are obviously many South Asians, but it's such a big country, everyone's spread out. It varies between state and state. Whereas in the UK, it's not too difficult to get from one side of the country to another. It's, it's 6-7 hours drive, whereas the US, in some states you just do the same page video in that many hours driving. So some of our communities are fairly closely knit. And I think growing up, I was surrounded by a lot of South Asians in the area I grew up in London. And it was around about the time when I'd say sort of urban desi music, if I will call it that, and Punjabi music was coming more into the forefront of the South Asian scene. So we had artists and musicians like Ice Cube, and then later on, obviously, like the Stereo Nation, Taz, the Rishi Riches, the Jay Shaws, they all came into play. I think growing up, there were many artists who were trying to do a lot of fusion as well. So fusing inspirations from Punjab, as well as India and Bollywood, with music we're hearing in the Western world, electronic, R&B, hip hop. And growing up, I was exposed to quite a bit of fusion, as well as artists like Sony and A.R. Rahman. And in addition to that as well, just from a cultural perspective, I grew up around the time when, if I can call it Desi club nights were a bit of a new thing. So that was interesting for the culture. We had people who were throwing all these South Asian events, and there was a whole culture, whole scene around that. It's changed a lot over the years, but growing up, I'd say I was definitely surrounded by these new cultural identities from the South Asian scene, and we had the artists, like I mentioned, experimenting with different types of sounds and fusion. Which is interesting because I speak to some other people from other parts of the world where they've not been exposed to that. The only South Asian music they're exposed to is what they see in like Bollywood movies, for example, or maybe when they go on vacation somewhere. Whereas I was a little bit fortunate, I grew up around growing and thriving scene, and from that we had radio stations grow, and now it's just expanded so much. So a major influence for the music I'm making today has been growing up in England around the South Asian scene.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because even in the States, I'm from Los Angeles, California. Like you said, I can drive 6 hours north and still be in the same state. And there are many Indians that are here, but they're dispersed, like you said, versus if you go into the East Coast, like New York, Pennsylvania, tri-state, DC area, New Jersey, they're hugely populated with Indian influence culture, not just Indian, but Pakistani, Bangladeshi, Sri Lankan, Nepal, etc. And we were also influenced by a lot of the Indian British music that was coming out there. If you talk about Stereo Nation, Taz, Rishi Rich, Jay Sean, even we had from North America come out, we had Raghav, we had a bunch of other stars or singers that later became stars, just share their musical influences. And I think it resonated with a lot of the remix culture that we see today, where you have a lot of the old classical songs that we heard our parents listen to on television and kind of instill those songs into us. And we're like, oh, that sound is really cool. And then we vibe it with what we're exposed to on it from an NRI standpoint of where we're listening to hip hop or Latin music. A lot of the fusion culture exists because of the different amalgamation of cultures that we share. And I think that's important to talk about because it's part of the heritage that we're going to be passing down to the next generation. So music is a universal language. And I believe that the West is finally catching on. You hear so many different hip hop songs have like bhangra beats in the background, or even the same thing, remixing like songs from the 50s, 60s, 70s, and then taking those sounds into Arab music, which is also very prevalent and dominated by the Bollywood culture because it has the same family values. So I think it's just a rich embroidery, and I'm glad you're bringing something new to the table and to continue that legacy. So can you discuss your EP and what listeners can expect to hear, and just tell us more about your specific sound for viewers that may not have heard you before, and what makes you Vik Toreus?
Well, yeah, so the EP is called Reincarnated, and it kind of links into what we just discussed about with fusion of music growing up. So me personally, I've always been the type of artist and DJ that I wouldn't say gets bored very quickly, but I'm sort of always looking for something new, fresh, something very fusional. I very quickly spot cliches and things like that. So, for example, if everyone is into R&B, hip hop, and Afrobeats, I will always be looking at the next coolest thing. You know, I will always be looking at something which is so different and interesting. And I think part of that comes from not just me growing up, but also my family as well. You know, they weren't born in the UK; they were born in Africa and they immigrated to the UK. But we do have a family in India as well as other parts of the world. So that's encouraged me to travel a lot. So me personally, I do travel the world a lot. I've been to many different countries and continents, and all of that was really the basis for me to produce this EP, Reincarnation. So the inspiration, it comes from sounds and rhythms which I've heard in different parts of the world, and I've taken that inspiration and I've tried to fuse it with some of my favorite South Asian songs, Bollywood and Punjabi. So, for example, very famous Bollywood song, which I love and many people do, is Chikari, which is a huge dance floor hit. You know, I've had so many remixes of that song. I've got so many remixes of it.
Every Holi, it happens. There's a new remix.
Exactly, yeah, it's a big Holi song. And I did like a Brazilian ballet funk remix of that. And, you know, I love ballet funk because I've visited Brazil a number of different times. And I understood about this really exciting genre, ballet funk, you know, which came from the favelas, you know, years ago, like, several years ago when I went to Brazil, where now it's popular everywhere. But when I went to Brazil, I heard this and I knew it was going to be something really big. So I started producing South Asian music with ballet funk drum patterns, and that was really one of the inspirations for one of the remixes on the EP, which is called Pichikari Funk. And then the other tracks are remixes which also have world music inspirations. For example, there's a track on there called Goya, which is a medley of 3 90s Bollywood songs. So I actually collaborated with a singer from the US on that. And that has a very tropical, international feel. And when I played that for the first time to some non-South Asian DJs here in the UK, their instant response was, yeah, this has a very sort of international sound. A bit like Major Lazer, and if you look at what Diplo and Major Lazer are doing, much of the music they produce is quite international. You can hear that at different parties in different parts of the world. So that's the kind of feel I was going for, rather than the sort of cliche EDM Bollywood Mumbaton remix.
Regurgitation, right?
Yeah, which you may have heard lots of times. So effectively, that's what Reincarnation is. It's a collection of world music inspired remixes and remakes. I say remakes because it's not just a remix. I've actually rewritten, sort of developed the entire song with another artist in some cases. And all those songs are some of my favorite South Asian songs, hence the term being reincarnated into a new version.
I like that. I think Reincarnated is a very apt title, especially because the 90s is what's prevalent in music today, whether that is Western music or culture, pop culture references, or even the Desi Indian Bollywood 90s remakes of those songs that were more quirky and more personality based and situational, rather than just pure sentiment, where, you know, they all play their part and they all kind of evoke different emotions. But additionally, I do like that you mentioned how Indian music has influenced your upbringing, but also like specifically how specific artists, like you said, A.R. Rahman or other cultural influences. We talked about the British artists, but what other old school artists in India or Bollywood music have influenced your music today?
I'd say, I mean, I'm a big 90s Bollywood fan because I grew up in the 90s.
Right.
In my household, we were watching lots of Bollywood movies, like, you know, the old school Akshay Kumar, Shah Rukh Khan, Madhuri Dixit movies. You know, I just sort of fell in love with them and fell in love with the actors as well. You know, as a kid, as you do when you go through all those things as a teenager. But also the sounds as well. You know, a lot of those sounds which came from the songs were very melodic. You know, so what I would do is I would hear like a song like whatever it might be, and then I would try and replay that on the keyboard, and you know, you could quite easily with a bit of practice play some of those melodies on the keyboard, which is what I found so interesting. But yeah, I'd say sort of definitely anything from 90s Bollywood, so big playback singers like Lata Mangeshkar, Udit Narayan, Kumar Sanu, you know, those were some of my biggest inspirations, as well as, almost everything that A.R. does. I'm a big fan of everything that he does. And then, I didn't really grow up with 60s and 70s, like Muhammad Rafi,
Lata Mangeshkar, Asha Bhosle.
I do have an appreciation for all of those artists in the genres. Because my parents were educating me on that. So going back, I did spend a lot of time listening to some of the really old indie songs, and I love those as well. So.
That's awesome. And then I know you touched upon how you recorded with an American singer for this specific EP. So what I wanted to touch base about is we talked about music, culture, heritage, our influences in England, India, US. What do you think the Indian music scene has evolved to when it comes to Western society, but also when it comes to Western artists? Like, what do you suggest artists that are listening or watching us today? What are some key pointers that you would give them? Some advice, some suggestions on what it takes to hone your craft, or what the social responsibility is?
Yeah, I think with the sort of scene in India, there are a number of different scenes in India. So you have the independent scene, you also have the Bollywood scene as well, which has gone through many different cycles. I kind of feel that with Bollywood, in some cases, they do look to the West for ideas, inspiration for music and movies that they, that they sort of get involved in and produce, and they sort of take up ideas or copy them, or sometimes mimic them and just try and do their own basic spin on it. What I'm noticing more and more now is, especially the Bollywood scene, is they are looking at more the independent artists in the US and the UK. So they will collaborate with someone like a Rishi Rich or Jay Sean or
a Zach Knight,
a Jazz Tommy or someone, and they will try and use them to create remakes of their songs, which will popular in the West, and then incorporate those in Bollywood movies. Hence why you see so many remakes now. I think this is a good time for more independent artists to make a name for themselves and to actually go and get noticed. For example, if you look at someone like A.P. Dylan, who's kind of done his own thing now and has had a lot of success. So typically that's someone I wouldn't be surprised that Bollywood are already speaking to and saying, okay, we want to make a Bollywood version of that one day. Very nice, will pay this much amount of money, and they do pay for a lot of people. There's also things that as well. So I think they are definitely keeping their eye on what some of the Western artists are doing in the UK and the US. And I think now more than ever, it's an amazing time to be an independent artist and to get known and heard. The platforms are all open now. You can post what you want on TikTok and YouTube. You're from LA, if you get artists like Videobox, who's done so well, just by growing on social media and having these amazing covers and visual songs on YouTube. But I think, going to that part of your question, which was advice for those types of artists, I would just say, I know it sounds a bit cliche, but I would just say kind of do what you're really passionate about and what you love, and try to find your niche. And if you're someone in the US who's exposed to, for example, hip hop or electronic music, but as well as maybe being exposed to South Asian music, then see how you can do something cool to combine the two together. It doesn't have to be just one particular genre. I'd just say try and do something which is unique, but at the same time something which is also very honest as well. Try not to mimic too much of the artists you may see with huge followings on social media, TikTok, YouTube. There's already a Videobox who's amazing. You don't have to do exactly what she's doing.
Yeah,
right.
Try and find
your authentic sound, your authentic personality, right?
Yeah, it just has to be very, very real and very honest. It's one of those things which it just takes time to grow and for people to sort of hear your sound. But that's probably the best advice I can give.
No, I'm really happy you mentioned authenticity, because I think a lot of people, regardless of geographic location, whether it's the East or the West, they try to mimic what is popular based off of data analytics from social media and what goes viral and what doesn't. So they try to mimic what's popular instead of creating their own sound, which is original, and then that organically growing because it resonates with audiences. So I think that's an important note to catch up on.
The other thing I would just add to that is there are a lot of sort of hip hop R&B desi artists in the UK and the US who are doing great things. And what I've noticed is for a while, they've tried to, I just find that some of them are actually trying to sort of be a bit too much like Western artists and trying to copy exactly what they are doing. Whereas, it's like they're trying to be the next Drake and then just sort of singing or rapping in Punjabi over a hip hop beat and stuff, which is cool. But, sometimes I do feel that with these artists, it's okay to be proud of your heritage and to have that kind of authentic feel, which shows your culture and where you come from. I think that's another piece of advice I would give to artists is don't get too caught up in being like the cool Western artists. Just be authentic, be yourself, and if you love having a desi side, bring that out as well. I think people are interested in that. Not only South Asians are interested in South Asians, show off their culture and be happy and proud of that, rather than copying what another Western artist is doing. So I think that makes a bit of sense.
I think it totally resonates. So a little background information about me. I'm a singer, actually, and I've been a part of many different reality shows. And I was trained in American classical and Hindustani semi-classical, as well as Bengali classical Rabindra Sangeet music. So music hits a different string for me. And I grew up listening to, ballad powerhouses like Whitney Houston, Mariah Carey, Celine Dion, and now we have people like Adele or even Christina Aguilera from the 90s, right? And I think that's where it strikes a chord with me, because growing up with bassy musical background, I always appreciated melody. And I know the DJ scene sometimes has its own genre of like EDM or just house music, which is fine. It's in its own genre. But for me, what really resonates musically is stuff that has melody to it, sound that can surpass words and emotions. And I feel like melodic compositions really resonate with audiences across the globe. And I would see some people who would try to mimic, like I know you mentioned, American or British artists trying to mimic Drake. But I saw the same thing happening in the East, right? Where everybody wanted to sing like Lata Mangeshkar or Asha Bhosle, and then became like everybody wanted to sound like Shreya Ghoshal or Cindy Chauhan, and everybody wanted to be someone who's already been. So I think the moral of what you're saying is that it's better to be a first-rate version of yourself rather than a second-rate version of somebody else. And I think that's really going to hit a note with a lot of musical artists today. So, Vik Toreus, it was amazing speaking to you and sharing your journey with us. I would like our audiences to know, what are some songs or genres or of music or, any artist that people would be surprised that you vibe to, or something that they would never expect you to listen to. Like for me, I listen to old school jazz, and that's something that most people don't, listen to anymore, or like really that 1940s old jazz sound, which is not something I listen to daily, but it is something that's a surprising genre. So what's yours?
So I like so many different types of genres. I think people who follow my radio show know that I'm really into world music, so everything from Latin American to Middle Eastern to African music to East Asian, which is a massive variety, as well as hip-hop, urban electronic music. But I guess one genre which I'm a big fan of, which people don't always expect, is heavy metal. I was actually like a really big metal fan. I was a huge fan of bands like Big Pop, Metallica, Rage Against the Machine. I went through like a very sort of hardcore metal phase. Especially with bands like Linkin Park and Red Hot Chili Peppers, just the lyrics and just the composition of some of the songs that they produced. That was a huge inspiration for the music I make. Like for example, on the EP Reincarnated, that track I mentioned, called the majority of that track, the backing is from a guitar, which I played, and I learned guitar because I studied guitar when I was in school, and I studied guitar in school because I was a huge fan of many of these rock and heavy metal bands. So that's the type of music that I listen to casually, as opposed to maybe when I'm DJing for a specific event.
That's awesome. How many instruments do you play?
So I play the guitar, piano, keyboard, but I don't play I'm not some super professional in the sense that I can play and do a live performance at a show. But I can play and do a few things when I'm producing music, as well as maybe just doing a live stream or something like that.
That's awesome. I learned how to play the harmonium first because of the classical influence. And so my left hand is, sorry, what was that?
No, I said that's amazing.
Yeah, so thanks. I played the harmonium and so my left hand is already not dominant. And so it was used to bellowing the accordion part of it. And so then I learned how to play the piano second. And then that became a transition in learning how to play chords and things like that. So it's always interesting how the mind works and to get used to different instruments and how music artists are. So Vik Toreus, would you like to have a few last words for our listeners and, what else they can expect from your EP and any last notes?
I'd say, go check out my EP, Reincarnated. It's a collection of my very South Asian records, which have been remixed and remade inspired by world music. It's available on my Bandcamp page, so victorious.bandcamp.com. And you can also hear it on SoundCloud as well, soundcloud.com/Victorious. We're working on getting one or two remixes on Spotify, but it's a bit tricky with copyright and things like that. But those are the two places to go. My radio show, if you really like world music and South Asian fusion, is called United Colors. You can catch that on Rukus Ave Radio every week. It's on Mondays, 10 p.m. PST, as well as Tuesdays, 2 p.m. EST and 7 p.m. BST. We have an Instagram page as well, United Colors Radio. And you can also follow me as well on all socials, Instagram, TikTok, Victorious, Viktoreus.
Amazing. I'm sure to, follow you and listen to all of your other sounds, which I caught a few on the website. So it's definitely really interesting. And once again, congratulations on all of your hard work thus far. And I wish you the best of luck for your endeavors, including this EP. And I'm sure it's going to strike a chord with audiences. So I'm going to call it a day for our special segment. So Rukus Avenue radio listeners, this is Priyadarshini G. Roy, your Rukus Avenue correspondent, signing off with Vik Toreus. Until next time.